But for me, it ultimately came down to a choice between living my truth or dying. That was the choice, and I chose to live.
You're chasing something different than I.
I'm Felix.
How you doing? I'm Lilith. You well?
How's it going? Not too bad.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Can't complain.
We're here with GORM. We're going to ask each other some questions and answer them ourselves, I guess. So the first one is, tell us your story. Who are you? My name's Lilith. I'm a trans woman, and I work for the Transgender Equality Network of Ireland. I'm a community development officer. So I work with adults in the community, linking into to services, support groups, and working around mental health and resilience and doing events and all that sort of stuff. What about yourself?
Sweet. I'm Felix. I'm a trans man, or a non-binary trans man. I'm wibbly wobbly. I am a filmmaker and a writer and mostly a comedian at the moment as well. I perform. I'm part of a comedy club in Dublin called Hysteria Comedy, which was set up by, at the time, 3 trans people, and then later the other one came out, and now there's like 10 of us, so it's no longer a trans majority, but it's close, which is fun. There's so much language in the LGBTQ plus community. What is the best way to refer to trans people?
The trans people. I mean, if you're referring to me, probably Lilith.
Sure. It's a good start.
It's a good start.
All right.
My pronouns are she, her, so that works for me. Some it's they, them, if they're non-binary, and I suppose, do you prefer he or they yourself?
I prefer he, him. I'm kind of, sometimes I do feel a little bit like I'm kind of stealing non-binary valor, because I'm like, I feel like a lot of people have accepted that like a lot of non-binary people use they them pronouns, and if you use they them pronouns, like that is kind of an indicator of you being non-binary, if that makes sense. But I prefer he, him personally, and I'm very chill with like masculine coded language as well. So I'm like, that's grand for me. And I don't know, I feel like in terms of like referring to trans people in general, like taking cues from the person themselves is super important. Like, and I think trying to play this kind of guessing game where it's like, oh, well, how should I try and refer to someone if I meet them and they look this way or they act this way? It's like, why not just ask if you don't know?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, just meet them where they are. If you make a mistake, apologize, thank them, move on.
Yeah, and make an effort to, continue
it.
doing the right thing.
That's it. What is your opinion on trans people in sport?
Oh, you play sports?
No.
Me neither. Oh God, I feel like it's one of those things that like it's talked about so much more than it is really like an issue in the world.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where like there are so few trans people who are not even necessarily just like playing sport, but playing sport at like a professional or a semi-professional level, that like it's not that much of an issue. And I think a lot of the time it's kind of a smokescreen for people being like, trans people are a problem and we need to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been over 70,000 Olympians and only one of them has been trans. And there's this focus on elite sports. And like moving aside from that anyway, most people, when it comes to sports, when it comes to activity, it's about being in your community and being involved on community level. And trans people often feel excluded from that for various reasons. Like I was reading the other day that they're on about, say, puberty blockers and how that affects bone density. Actually, what they think that the science is suggesting is that because trans people tend to be less active, that's the actual reason why trans people's bones have issues in terms of bone density. And yeah, I think it's just the science says that trans people, and we're talking about trans women most of the time here, that there's no proven advantage overall, and when it comes to trans people once you're on HRT for a certain amount of time, and that really it should be the sporting bodies that are making decisions about what about inclusion in those elite arenas, but really for the most people it's just about actually just feeling safe, feeling that you can be included in sport,
Absolutely.
being active and being healthy. And when this conversation is happening over our heads, it makes trans people feel less welcome in engaging in sporting activities, which can have knock-on health effects for the trans community.
Yeah. I saw recently that some turf was trying to claim that trans men have a biological advantage over cis men in sports, and I'm like, well, that's a new one. What are your thoughts on trans people being the subject of comedy?
My thoughts? I think trans people are hilarious, and Eddie Izzard is a great example. Who's actually funny in 2 different languages.
Oh yeah, at least.
That's it. I mean, there's a lot of talk about certain comedians on certain streaming networks or whatever, and I think that sort of comedy is punching down. I mean, and it's disrespectful. A clip that I saw recently of let's call him Gicky Your Vase. Basically
Kicking my vase.
saying that trans women are rapists, and that's somehow funny.
I think he's not been funny in years. Jesus, he took a 10-year break, and it's like, do longer. No, like as a comedian myself, like I'm surrounded. Currently, the Dublin scene has like a bunch of really cool trans comics, myself included. And like, I think something that people kind of assume when they think about like trans comedy is that like it's all kind of the same style or the same kind of jokes, or it's even just like the same kind of jokes that you see on Twitter from like trans accounts, and like the variation is wild, and the different like perspectives, not even just in terms of like identity, because like there's all kinds of we've got there's me, and then there's like non-binary comics, and there's trans women, and like all different kind of like sexualities and expressions and all that kind of thing as well. So like this idea that like trans comedy even on its own is like a monolith, or like the idea that you can't joke about trans issues, like of course you can joke about anything. It's just like try to think about like the potential for harm there as well. And I think that's really important in comedy in general, because like I've seen people make like jokes about like absolutely horrible subjects, and sometimes they're absolutely horrible jokes, and sometimes they work because they're doing that subversion, and I think like, yeah, I think comedy can be like a tool for trans acceptance as well, where it's just like you're bringing people in, and you're getting people to like not necessarily laugh at you, but with you, and to like empathize with you if you're doing the comedy well,
Trans people are roughly 1% of the population. Why should I care about your identity?
I mean, there's other groups that are smaller than 1% of the population, and we care about them. No, I mean, it's like 1% of the population as far as we know. It's like when they stopped, beating children for using their left hand, like there was a jump, same.
Yeah.
What are the odds? More than 1%, apparently. But no, there was a huge jump in left-handedness, and I mean, I don't know if there was a bunch of think pieces at the time about rapid onset left-handedness or whatever. But
social contagion.
Yeah. But no, it turns out that when you like have less stigma about people expressing themselves and stuff. But in general, I think like 1% is a conservative estimate, and also like gender is something we gender's something we made up, It's like it's got some social functions to it. It has uses, I suppose. And like the fact that, you know, even the tie between like our bodies and gender identity and the way that we like operate in a society and stuff. There's like, oh geez, I've lost my train of thought entirely there.
Well, I think that people should care about trans people because I think actually trans people can be very much a healing element within society. Trans people are proof that you can fundamentally change who you are for the better, and despite what the world is telling you, despite everything, and despite society's expectations, despite how people tell you how you should or shouldn't be. And they can do that, and that means everybody can do that.
Absolutely,
you know,
it's inspirational.
So that's, you know, I think that's what trans people, you know, bring to the world, and I think that's really why people should care.
Absolutely.
You know, and also, you know, trans people are decent enough people, you know, on the whole. You know, we're your family members, we're in your communities, we're your bus drivers, comedians.
Friendly neighborhood comedians.
That's it, you know. So
yeah.
of course.
Also,
you
1%'s
should
not
care.
that small a number either. Like that's 1 in 100 people, and you know way more than 100 people in your life as well. So
That's
like,
it.
absolutely, like we're everywhere. We're secret everywhere. Oh, this one's fun. Did you have to transition? Couldn't you just have been a masculine woman / feminine man instead of transitioning?
Yes, I had to transition. At least in my instance, I can't talk for other people. I can't, you know, talk for other people's experience. But for me, it ultimately came down to a choice between living my truth or dying. That was the choice, and I chose to live. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I am who I am, and I'm proud and completely unapologetic about it. And you know, I don't care if you don't agree with who I am or what I do as an individual, to be honest.
Yeah.
And you know, you know, femininity and masculinity are you know, concepts. They're social constructs, and it's not really to do with that. You know, it's we you know. We have something in our core that, you know, defines us and who we are, and gender is a part of that. You know, sometimes that aligns with the sex that you've been assigned at birth. For most people, that's the case. For other people, it's not. And that's okay, that's fine. And, you know, all we're doing is just living our truth.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think there is like kind of fundamentally like a choice to be happy around kind of transition and stuff. I mean, this question in particular, like, I think there's kind of this misconception about like trans people that like I remember when I was kind of coming out, people were like, "Oh, would you not just be like a butch woman?" And honestly, like, I'm not that butch. Like, honestly, like I found myself kind of expressing in more feminine ways since I've come out and since I've transitioned. Partially because like I feel more comfortable being perceived as like a feminine man or like a camp or like a queer expressing guy than I was being like expressing in a like butch feminine kind of way, if that makes sense. And I think like that's kind of a misconception then that cis people have of trans people, that like we're fundamentally like crossing that kind of, that we're transitioning to be more normative, or we're transitioning like for like external reasons as opposed to internal reasons, if that makes sense. Because it's like, well, I wouldn't transition for you. You know, I'm doing it for me.
Yeah. What is the one thing the world needs right now?
Oh, a big question.
Yeah. What is?
Big question. Only one thing.
The one thing.
The one thing. I think more empathy and more like solidarity in general. I think like we've had huge issues, especially in the last few years, with you know, people feeling kind of isolated and people feeling like alienated from their communities. Like you were saying with the kind of 1% question. Oh, the 1% question makes it sound like we're kind of the ruling elites or something. But no, like I do think like people being more engaged in their communities, people having more kind of solidarity with the people around them, more spaces where they can like, you know, get to know the people around them and engage with. Because I think especially like in the last few years, like people have been real lonely and feeling that kind of lack of, you know, kind of town squares and like community centers and that kind of thing. I mean, like again, like I'm very fortunate in that like I've got the kind of comedy community in Dublin. I've got like the artistic community in Dublin, the trans community as well. Like I think in some ways queer people are lucky that we've got kind of organizations and stuff where we're putting on events and we're gathering together and we're talking about like ourselves and our issues and we're organizing and that kind of thing. I feel like some people who are in the more kind of mainstream categories in society like don't necessarily have that. And so I think like encouraging people to like get together around their hobbies and get together around like political issues, well, you know, maybe not all of them, but you know, getting together and yeah, just feeling more like a community. You know, I think that's needed.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we need more community, and I think that when it comes to minoritized communities, the trans community as well, that we should be listened to, and that you know, we should be respected more, and you know, it should be understood that we are our own experts on our own existence, and you know, we are living our truth, and that needs to be acknowledged.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that the world just needs a bit more compassion and a bit more solidarity and community. Community is really, really important for everyone.
What is the difference between sex and gender? Aren't they the same?
Well, I mean, it is sort of complex, I suppose, but it's also kind of simple. The way I see it is that there's sex, which is a biological thing, male, female, intersex, and so on and so forth. And then there's your innate gender, and kind of that is something that can be detected and can be seen in babies as young as about 18 months to 3. And then there is gender as a social construct. And that is what we use as the language we have in order to express that sense of ourselves and our lives. And it is, you know, is predicated by patriarchy. It's predicated by time, history, culture, fashion, and all those things. But it is real. You know, stop signs are a social construct. If you drive through a stop sign, there are consequences.
Gonna get hit by a bus.
Yeah. Money is a social construct. If you try and live without money, well, you know, it's not that easy.
Yeah, exactly.
We have social constructs in our lives, time, for example, that we use in order to move through the world. And when you know, people, you know, when theorists say that gender is performative, it doesn't mean that gender is necessarily just a performance. It means that we have to perform gender in order to live our lives within the worlds that we live. And yes, there are, you know, there are aspects of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be outside of those constructs that change and have different connotations over time. But that's the reality of the world that we live in. And for trans people, the gender, our innate gender, and who we are as people just doesn't align with the sex that we may have been assigned at birth, just purely based on observation.
Exactly. And I think like in terms of like physical transition and stuff, like have you heard this, there's a kind of thought experiment that people will do sometimes when they're kind of pre-coming out necessarily, where they're kind of thinking like, oh, well, if I was on like a desert island and there was no kind of society like around me, would I still want to transition like for myself? And a lot of people, the answer is yes, you know? And like, as much as, again, yeah, just like you were saying, there is kind of a bit of a melding between like there's the social role, but there's also like there's bodies and there's like internal identity, and that can be seen as young as like 1 or 2 years old. And this idea that like, because I think like physical transition is kind of, it's aligning something in terms of like the way other people see you, but it's also like a personal thing, you know? Like it's not just, oh yes, I would like to wear skirts and dresses out in public and I want people to treat me as a woman because that is who I am. But it's also like, I want my body to be this way and do these things, and that's also like, it's your body, you can do what you want with it.
You're chasing something different than I. No more casting shadows on your every smile.